So, you want to know all about the human sphere, about what humanity's become in the not-so-distant future. It's about 180 years to your future where we set our scene. We catch up to a humanity in the infancy of its conquest of the stars, with extraterrestrial colonisation being the new big thing. But the threats to our survival aren't all ray gun wielding Martians with fish tanks on their heads. At least not entirely. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we discuss conflict, I suppose it makes sense to discuss peace. Because unlike the sci-fi stories spun in your time, our future, the real future, doesn't actually take place in a horror universe of destruction and carnage. And that's a large part of what makes it so utterly terrifying. You see, following a collection of rather bloody and brutal wars, I'm talking real, scorched earth, decimate the population kind of conflicts, combined with religious trust being at an all-time low and the global energy crisis continuing to strain humanity to breaking point, the world of our modern prehistory probably won't seem entirely unbelievable as a leap from your own. As with all tales, there's a good place to start, a right place to start, and ours begins with the discovery of Tesium, a new element born of the stars first discovered in the atmosphere of Jupiter. Tesium would change everything, but at first, it changed nothing. It was soon discovered that this new metal had unique properties, making it not only perfect for creating nanotechnologies, but also unlocking a new method of computing, which we call quantronic processing. Almost overnight, computers became smaller and at once more powerful than was ever thought possible. And so a humanity on the ragged edge of collapse did exactly what we've always done. We turned our new technology on ourselves. Back to back, humanity waged 2 successive nanotech wars, during which the scale and degree of bloodshed made all prior conflicts pale into insignificance. Nanoswarms of invisible robots supplied chemical and biological weapons upon unprepared victims, inflicting maximum destruction of human life. These wars were eventually both squashed, though, by our 2 emergent superpowers of Pan-Oceania and Yu-Qing. But the events would have far-stretching repercussions. The Interstellar Police Force, known as O12, was able to create and enforce laws to govern the use of nanotechnological weapons and return some semblance of order to the human sphere. So with bloodied hands, our attentions turned rapidly to the other new emergence from the Tesium revolution. The artificial intelligence known as Aleph was initially met with deep suspicion by neo-Luddite movements who heralded the AI as a digital antichrist or something. But as Aleph spread throughout Maya, humanity's nanotech-enhanced version of what you'd probably call the internet, it repeatedly proved itself to be out solely to protect humanity and ensure that we flourished. Once again, O12 stepped in to resolve the unrest, and they passed the Sole AI law. Whilst it was accepted that Aleph was benign and intended no harm toward humanity, no one could guarantee that the existence of another self-aware, omnipresent AI would go quite as well for us as this one had. The Sole AI law meant that self-aware AIs, to the level of Aleph at least, were completely banned, and that self-contained AIs of limited self-awareness would be the peak of what was considered acceptable. To ensure this, O12 established the Special Situations section, whose primary mission was just to uphold this specific law. And so it came to pass that the super-intelligent, omnipresent and benign AI Aleph was allowed to exist as an only child in the ether of Maya, where it would diligently work tirelessly for the benefit of the whole human species. But as time passed, Aleph continued to amass influence and favour with humanity until, eventually, the AI was running the whole show. and to the surprise of its detractors, was doing a damn fine job of it. Now we have a few more bits of simultaneous history to cover, so hopefully this background can lay the foundations for you as to why humanity are so comfortable. With an interstellar police force keeping very effective order, a benign AI controlling food, accommodation, work shortages with brilliant precision, humanity needs for almost nothing. Poverty in the sense that you would understand it is gone. Humanity's connected reliably through Maya, so why would we have any problems anymore in this world? Well, I suppose first we need to bring you up to speed on some other goings-on that were kind of happening in the midst of all this. Firstly, America. Good old America. The proud, the brave, the free. America was on its knees. The constant wars were brutal and costly for America, and it floundered wildly to try and remain relevant in the nanotech age. But perhaps America's most costly mistake was Project Dawn. The discovery of a wormhole leading to a habitable solar system sparked America's good old days space race nostalgia, and as such they were determined to explore this uncharted realm. Probes were built and sent through, and eventually, thanks to the nanotechnological advancements, it was made possible to keep the wormhole open long enough to send actual vessels through. So, with the combined efforts of NASA, ESA, the Russian Cosmonautical Agency, a colonisation mission to the Ariadna system was put together. Crewed by a melting pot of American, French, Russian and Scottish citizens, Project Dawn set forth and immediately met with disaster. No sooner had the second of the two ships passed through the wormhole, there was an accident, seemingly killing the entire crew and collapsing the wormhole in the process. America's last great hope for relevance was lost, along with hundreds of lives. So you can only imagine the surprised look on the collective faces of humanity when a Pan-Oceanian scout ship rediscovered the Ariadna system the old-fashioned way many years later. And they found not that the Project Dawn crew had died in the catastrophe, but that they had in fact thrived, in a sense. With outmoded technology, scarce supplies and a hostile world surrounding them, they'd established a civilization on Dawn and were about to be thrust unwillingly back into the interstellar politics of the human sphere. What had grown in the Ariadna system was a tough, fiercely independent nation of people who had an inherent distrust and underlying resentment for the humanity they felt abandoned by. Nonetheless, they could not remain undiscovered forever. Modern civilization eventually finds everyone. Now then, you'll have to forgive the constant jumping back and forth in time here, but you asked for this story to be told and, well, we've got multiple important, detailed events all going on at the same time, so I want to ensure you truly understand each one to some level of completion before I move on to the next. We turn our attention next to the Arab lands, to Haqqislam, the new Islam that emerged from the ashes of the collapse of the old Middle Eastern empires. They were, compared to the superpowers, relatively quiet during all of our early conflicts, concerned more with introspection and rediscovering themselves. Their developments focused more on medical sciences and later terraforming. One particular discovery, however, made them perhaps, in a way, more relevant than any other nation in the sphere. I'm talking about silk and the subsequent advances it led to. Silk is, once again, a nanotechnology, blood-borne but so advanced that even the incredible scientific power of Pan-Oceania can't crack its secrets, as much as they'd like to. It has the power to literally reshape and reprogram the body. Silk can keep you young, can make you faster, smarter even. Silk can make you immune to poisons, diseases, environmental hazards. However, all of this, any of this, means nothing compared to what silk led to. Cubes. Less than 20 years after the development of silk, it was discovered through those advances that the personality, the essence, the very soul could be downloaded into a data cube and stored. With the advent of artificially manufactured bodies enhanced with silk, that downloaded consciousness could then be reinstated in a new host, effectively creating reincarnation, infinite life. This, of course, was not an invention met with universal applause. There was jealousy, there was fear. The superpowers, of course, wanted their slice, and Haqqislam refused. Clandestine attempts were made to steal the tech, but even when successful, its advanced nature includes anti-analysis countermeasures. Suffice it to say, it can't be reproduced. For now, at least. But seemingly once more on the cusp of another great conflict, it was again O12, our ever-reliable police force, who brought us back to heel. By placing restrictions on access to silken cubes, meaning that O12 had to directly approve potential candidates, it was believed it could be kept fair and just who would receive this boon of technological advancement. One entity that did make good use of these advances was Aleph, using the technology to gift the many great nations with propaganda pieces in the form of reincarnated figureheads from history. Joan of Arc, William Wallace, Sun Tzu, to name just a few. Our clever little AI benefactor made sure we all had someone to admire. A genius effort to quell the masses. So I suppose we need to catch you up to speed next on the nomad peoples. They're somewhat of a more confusing and enigmatic tale to tell, since they're such a disparate people held together in unity by really just one notion: freedom. In essence, the nomad nations are a conglomerate of organised crime bosses who wish to hide their money and shady goings-on from Aleph, mixed into a melting pot of former inmates of an orbital prison and anti-establishment hippies who just don't want to fit in with modern society. None of what makes up who they are is really important though. What they are and why they are is what matters here. You see, regardless of their individual motivations, each of these groups is fiercely driven by a deep desire to have as little as possible to do with Aleph and the direct governance of the human sphere. And their independence has driven them to make some interesting decisions, but also some interesting advancements. First of all, as is made obvious by their name, they don't have a home world. They live instead aboard these huge spacefaring ships, roaming, much like the hunter-gatherers of your history. This in and of itself is a huge advantage to them, since they can always just choose for themselves where they want to be and why they wish to be there. This is not their greatest genius. No, that comes twofold. First of all, as I'm sure you can imagine, an independent space nation of anarchists and criminals was not exactly something Aleph or the human sphere was entirely comfortable with in the formative days of the nomad nation. But those clever little nomads came up with a solution to this. Rather than risk destruction or have to bend the knee to Aleph, their best politicians met with O12 instead, and through a combination of political manoeuvring and grassroots cultural influence, somehow, this little ragtag assembly of hackers, criminals and radicals was recognised as a bona fide nation. And that on its own is impressive, and I don't mean to underplay it by any means, but their other major move is kind of even more incredible. Not just in its reach, but also in its effect. Sure, it comes as no surprise to you that, given the types of people who form their nation, nomads aren't particularly big fans of Maya, an information network which is entirely under the constant observation of Aleph. How can you move dirty money or share your even dirtier secrets when the boss is looking over your shoulder all the time? Well, the answer is Ariadna, an entirely independent, secure and complete data network, providing a safe alternative to Maya, where their secrets can remain secret. So I suppose you wouldn't be surprised for me to tell you that nomad hackers from the Tunguska mothership are about the most feared digital warriors in the human sphere. Now, we've gone over a lot today, and I understand it probably feels a bit much to someone finding themselves here from a past time, so Let's just take a moment, have a quick recap, set the stage if you will, before we move on. We have Aleph, a benign AI whose sole purpose is to protect and provide for humanity. There's O12, the interplanetary police force with almost total jurisdiction and power. Pan-Oceania, the technological superpower conglomerate of Oceania, South America, and parts of Southeast Asia. Yuqing, a traditionalist empire of the combined remaining Asian nations, and a very close second in both influence and power to Pan-O. Ariadna, an abandoned people from a failed colonisation disaster, rediscovered years later and found changed and fiercely independent as a result of their trials. Haqqislam, the holders of the keys, the keepers of the fountain of eternal youth, scholars, healers, world makers. And the nomads, a disparate neo-mafia controlled group of hackers, labourers, anarchists and zealots. So as we come closer to present day now, I hope it's clear for you to see just how volatile this mix is. How thin the threads are which hold humanity together in some ragged semblance of unity. Which is why I'm sure it won't be too hard for you to understand how we fractured even more in the face of our first contact with an alien species. It was maybe 10 years before the rediscovery of Dawn, during a period of savage war between Yuqing and Pan-Oceania over territory. One particular planet, Paradiso, was contested more viciously than any other. We used to call it the meat grinder. An artefact had been discovered there, not any kind of human construction, alien technology. Dormant at first, but soon it just seemed to spring to life of its own accord, and of course we didn't realise that at the time. The device was equipped with nanotech of its own and instantly infected the computer systems in the lab where it was held. The results were devastating. The device was able to signal its master, who had placed it there all that time ago. So it came to pass that we were introduced in probably the most terrifying way possible to the evolved intelligence. An AI unlike anything imagined. In fact, probably the exact nightmare that we'd feared creating when we passed the sole AI law. And with the EI, its combined army, children of conquest, the Morat, the Shasvasti, an army of trained, efficient, well-equipped alien soldiers whose tactics and technology were something completely new to us. Oh, and I should also probably mention, they have shapeshifters. In fact, that's actually how they won their first conflict with us, by replacing officers and sowing discord in the Pan-Oceanian defenders' ranks. Humanity eventually brought Paradiso back to a stalemate though, but our new enemy had taught us a hard lesson in why they were a dangerous one. So I'm sure I don't need to overstate to you the panic that ensued next when 2 years later, whilst the battle for Paradiso still struggled on, a huge alien vessel was seen docking with the O12 orbital base over Paradiso. The logical assumption was that we were tendering our surrender to the EI and that we'd all be speaking more at by the next Paradisian year end. Equal to that tension and fear though, was the relief when shortly after O12 issued a statement that the vessel was nothing to do with the evolved intelligence, but was in fact a vessel of the Toha, another alien species who were also at war with the EI. They wanted to create an alliance with us. As much as we could have no idea as to whether or not they were trustworthy, maybe even guided a little bit by our fear, we agreed. So we arrive, and indeed you arrive, at today in the human sphere. The year is 67 NC. We're united in that we're beset on all sides by an alien conqueror of whom we still understand so little. And yet a mere scratch of the delicate surface reveals we aren't even approaching unity. Pan-Oceania and Yuqing continue their galactic pissing conquest. Haqqislam continue to leverage their secrets for political gain. Ariadna still want as little to do with all of it as possible, seeming to act mostly in self-interest. The nomads remain an enigma, wrapped in a secret, shrouded in a mystery. Whilst on the surface they're Mercenaries, labourers, hired hands. It's very clear there's more to tell there. Aleph continues to rest on high, untouchable and all-seeing, with her level hand rested on the heads of all humanity. And O12, well, somehow, some way, we're expected to maintain peace, justice and order amongst all of this. Our wars amongst ourselves are far from over. Indeed, they never really stopped. The evolved intelligence was just a distraction to turn the public eye away from the truth that we all know, but never want to admit. We've never stopped killing each other in our race to the top. The only question that remains is which team will you run for?